Hello everyone, this is Prue, and this is my first educational video for Layered Ternary Harmony Story. Very excited about it, very excited to share Paradise Story with all of you. This is in response to some requests I've gotten recently for more information on how to use Layered Ternary Harmony Story. Before I begin, why don't I just spend a couple sentences on where anyone might be interested in applying Layered Ternary Harmony Story. So, Layered Ternary Harmony Story would make a wonderful addition to anyone's life. First of all, it can make you a happier, more relaxed person, more successful in your relationships, in your daily life, in any of your ventures. That's one. Secondly, it does align with natural observation in all layers of the natural world. So this would put you in sync with everything around you, which is part of the problem. We've been taught that it doesn't matter, but it really actually does. Anyone with any kind of mental imbalances or just a negative days, anyone experiencing negativity, which probably is most of us. Thankfully, this is immunity to it. So I spend my days outside of that negativity bubble now for about a year now, and delicious. Works every time, and it's authentic. So I hope I've caught your attention, at least some of you, and I will begin. I have some prepared things I'm going to read, and then what I'll do is I'll read them, and then I'll kind of maybe look at the slide and see if there's a little bit more I can add to it to help synthesize. And feel free to contact me directly at my email is best, espressolico@gmail.com, ESPRESSOLICO. Yes, I love espresso. Okay. Let's get on with it. I'll begin with my prepared notes and more formal. Hi everyone. I want to share with you a brief overview of Harmonic Paradise Studios, which is the effort that I've named this whole effort, if you will. It's been my obsession for the past 6 years, and I hope it will inspire some of you to want to help me as it begins its next phase. Its next phase actually is online first, and then in the real world next, just based on resources, and it helps really nail down all the planning and minimize our footprint. But it would be an entertainment and technology company, and it would be built on the same Layered Ternary Harmony Story principles that we would build everything on. So this would be a new age company, a very new one, very different than what we've been used to. Yeah, okay. This sometimes gives me a hard time, so you'll pardon me, and I will launch it again. Okay. Well, actually, real quick, before I even hit this slide, there's a slide I would have liked to have put in, and that is just a little bit about who I am. So what I consider myself at this point is a hobbyist universal explorer and a past IBM systems programmer for IBM mainframes back in the 80s. You know, it was in support of the U.S. Air Force's classified satellite operations. So it was something, you know, important. And it allowed me to get comfortable with kind of like the insides of big computers, if you will. So after some disappointment in my technology careers at IBM, followed by 3Com and Nortel, which were TCP/IP networking companies that the internet runs over. In technical sales and sales support engineering roles, I found myself nearly 10 years into a failing restaurant business. It was called Tuco's. Many of you that will watch this probably had visited it more than once, maybe. Very special place. It was my dream, which I was pursuing. And I wanted to understand the source of my disappointments and unhappiness by trying to program what I was observing. When I did my computer science degree over at Cal State Hayward, I remember how much I enjoyed the programming assignments that we would be given. So that was what I chose to use to help me navigate through my insides, looking inward and trying to understand why I was so unhappy and why I was seeing so much failure. Okay, now, layered ternary harmony story. Now we know I didn't actually set out to discover it. I was actually just trying to figure out what's wrong with my life, and I chose computer programming as the way to do it, and it led to this, a miracle actually. So, you know, what is it? Well, first, you need to think of it as a story. But a story means a little more than how we've been told. A story in this particular domain is a machine executable universal software and architecture. And it's something that can run on a hardware platform such as a hydrogen atom, which exists throughout our entire cosmos and which forms itself into stars, and those stars produce the elements that produce us. So, yes, and now this can be engineered into tools to communicate with one another about this, and to build and compare and measure universal things, such as a civilization, or a human's mind, or an atom. It's universal. In that new dimension, this story is Paradise Story, which is the highest story. Paradise Story is an expanding harmony story. Paradise represents that, so Paradise Story. And you have the story, and you have Paradise Story consciousness, the observer of that story. And what those two things translate to is Paradise Story, the software, Paradise Story consciousness, the CPU. And then you have Paradise Story conscious hydrogen-based computing, which is our physical cosmos, our physical universe, the world as we've understood it today. So these are layers that layer just like our smartphones, no different. And the important thing about this is what controls our physical universe and our daily physical experience. In other words, our focus on the physical universe is like looking at the back or the wake of a boat. And now, with these new discoveries, we can turn around and we could look out the front window of the boat and decide and see a new world and decide better where we want to go and how to get there. Okay. This gives me a little bit of a hard time here. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So, layered ternary harmony story. Well, it's a beekeeper story, so we'll use that to illustrate. A beekeeper earns a living helping farmers pollinate their crops and helping keep kitchens stocked with nutritious, delicious honey. With the vast majority of the work, the pollination and the production of the honey, being done by the bees and not the beekeepers. Okay, so I have a question for you. What does the beekeeper need to do to motivate the bees to do their work diligently and on time and with a good attitude every day? The answer is almost nothing, because it's basically nearly free. It costs the beekeeper basically the expense of providing a home for the bees to keep them there willingly, and to provide them an environment with favorable climate and access to lots of yummy nectar and pollen. And the bees gladly do the rest from their own natural urges and attractions. So what this story is the beekeeper uses their higher intelligence to manipulate the bees using housing and environment to provide the beekeeper essentially free work and treasure. And it's win-win. Everybody wins in this. Everybody wins. There is no loser in this. And that's the basis of layered ternary harmony story and our entire universe, actually. Give this a second to move forward. Let's see if it does. There we go. Okay, so now, this is the part where I'm going to describe layered ternary harmony story in a sequence of slides that build. And this will take you actually through the exact same process that my own mind went through over the past 6 years, as I first and foremost decided, man, this failure and unhappiness sucks. You know, what's going on? From that point on, I kind of went through this same process that I'm going to take you through. So let's see how it works. We begin with our current understanding and definition of the universe around us, which is basically, you see it in every college. It's sectioned off in silos in physics and chemistry and biology and astronomy and history and geology and politics and religion. All these things, all kind of, some tentacles into the others, but silos, and pretty physically based. From there, the first step that's taken is, let's see if this updates here. There we go, is we refine that view and keeping it perfectly accurate still within observations of natural world, but beefing it up. So now the first step is we start to see the universe as our physical hydrogen-based universe, which is perfectly accurate, okay? Perfectly accurate. Oh, yes, this is a hydrogen-based universe, and it is physical. And now, to that, we add the next change. Waiting on this slide to, there we go. The next addition is now we see we've added new layer on top of the physical layer that we have understood to be our universe now. We've added a story layer, which is software layer basically. We've added a story consciousness layer, which is CPU basically. And all of this resides in the imaginary world layer, which is birthed out of infinite possibilities. Because inside of infinite possibilities, there exists the possibility of logic so powerful that it spawns expanding consciousness and builds itself into this very infinitely expanding universe with each of us in it, basically as users of it, as characters, as customers, if you will, for us to enjoy. Now that we have our view of our universe divided up into some layers, the next step to walk you through this is, bear with me here. See these lines that I've just added? Imagine them as the lines of sheet music. But each line now is a different channel, a different world, if you will. It could be an urge. It could be light. It could be sound. It could be a molecule detected as smell or as taste. It could be our imagination. It could be a thought. It could be an erotic version of these things. It could be pain. It could be any number of things. And with this sheet music, we could insert things in such a way as to produce stories. And not only stories, but if we organize them just right, we can produce stories of higher and ever higher layers of harmony, if you will, like an orchestra. And in fact, this process looks and feels very much like the process of composing music and producing it. Okay. I think the pace is fine. I hope I'm not going too fast. Since I'm doing this out in a vacuum, I don't really get the feedback. Well, let's move on to the next step. Now that we have a story platform mapped to our current universe, let's build let's put on this the stories that we observe. Well, next stories we observe the hydrogen story immediately after Big Bang, hydrogen and helium, and they form themselves into stars. We observe that. That's observable, and those stars produce our heavier elements, all the elements up to 92, besides hydrogen and helium, including the elements carbon, phosphorus, oxygen, and sulfur, which are used in our DNA, in our amino acids, in our lipids, in our cells, in our everything, from human all the way down to a virus, life itself, and water. And what all of these have in common is that they are hydrogen molecules reconnecting itself to an element that has gone through a star transformation. So when we see hydrogen now, or when we see water now, we don't just see water, we see a hydrogen molecule that has reconnected with itself as a star element, oxygen. So inside of each hydrogen molecule, we can use our minds to understand that there's an entire energy of a star behind it, inside of each molecule. And we are water beings, primarily made up of water. Each water molecule has the energy of a star and the intelligence of it inside of each of it, functioning as one colony, by the way. All water functioning as one colony, in layers, of course. Now let's add something else to this story. So we've added this star and hydrogen and helium and elements story, and now we add our mind story, our CPU, the molecules including water, DNA, and RNA. These molecules, imagine them as prisms, if you will, that allow us to sense these stories coming in through these different channels. And then the software intelligence inside of that mind to synthesize that into a stream of thought and consciousness that we see and feel as everyday life. You know, we're not having to actively go through each one of those channels and put them together. That's all done by layers below us that do it automatically without our need to involve it, except as just the overall sponsor of it all. In other words, we are like the gods of the organs inside of us, but they're like our gods.